What's up, Marvel fans? We're the Hills Maniacs, and today we are going to be talking about our top 10 favorite Marvel movies of all time. So basically, how this works is we have each compiled our own list of 10 Marvel movies that we both think are the best. This includes not just the MCU, but just Marvel movies in general. It could be the X-Men movies, could be the Sony Spider-Man movies, that sort of stuff. Anything that has been Marvel affiliated, can qualify for this list. I know for me it was kind of hard to choose really because there's a lot of really good Marvel movies out there, and to choose only 10 of them was kind of hard. So we're going to talk about, give our thoughts on each movie and kind of just talk about why we placed them where we did and that sort of thing. Here we go. We'll start off at number 10. For me, it's the first X-Men movie. I know some people would probably put this higher, maybe, or whatever, but thinking back to it and stuff, it is kind of, it is a classic and it is iconic and everything. Because, this was one of the first superhero movies that existed, really. I think it came out along the same time as Spider Man, or maybe before that, even. I'm not really sure exactly when it came out, but it kind of defined what the superhero genre sort of is. And I think it was a good starting point, or like around the same time as Spider Man, so there wasn't really many movies like this at the time. And I think to just the way they introduced us to all the characters and everything just within the span of one movie, and we got a feel for like what all their powers are and who they are as people and that sort of thing, and you see the struggles that they go through living as mutants and everything. I thought that was all really well done, and it kind of gave you a first glimpse into what a superhero movie should actually be about. It's not just like the superhero battles and everything else. It's also the human aspect to it, and especially with them being mutants, it's like you get that sort of almost like racism type of thing where like people look down on them because they're different and that sort of, so it kind of teaches you that lesson in there as well. I don't think it was like the best superhero movie, but for its time I think it did really well portraying and capturing all of that. But compared to the others on my list, it is like right down there at the bottom, I think. But it's still not a bad movie, and if you go back and rewatch it, it does have that rewatchability and everything. It's number 10 on my list, but I still think it should be considered one of the best Marvel movies of all time.
Yeah, I'll comment on that a little bit later because I have it farther down on my list. So my number 10, and this is a controversial opinion, and I really don't care because I had a fun time with the movie. I enjoyed it, and that's what this list is supposed to be about, and that is Fant4stic.
Really?
You can hate on it all you want, but for me, I would rather rewatch that one than the original Fantastic Four.
Wow.
But then again, I like the Acolyte, and so you know. But I don't know. For me, it just gave it. I guess seeing the real powers of Doctor Doom in this one, where it gave you more of that kind of like eerie, like destructive feeling. When he busts into the lab and then he's like destroying stuff, and they can't really do anything. At first, and not just that, it also showed them sort of younger, but also like getting their powers younger and having to learn how to process the fact that they have these powers and how to control their powers and all that kind of stuff. And then it also showed the conflict between them, where Ben and Reed weren't really on speaking terms after this happened because Ben felt that Reed was only caring about himself and all that kind of stuff. And just to give you like a younger kind of cast for it, instead of the sort of older cast that we got with the original Fantastic Four, I think it kind of brings it in a little bit and kind of shows you that they were less mature, I guess, when they got their powers and all that kind of stuff. And then it just works it in. So that's why, for me, I enjoyed watching it. And again, it's controversial. I know that. On the note of controversial opinions, my number 9 is X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Ooh.
So, again, as a standalone film, if you don't count it as anything else, like part of the X-Men, if you don't count it as, you just look at it from the perspective of it being a solo Wolverine movie, and you don't take into account the stuff that happens in the X-Men franchise. You don't take into account anything that happens.
Forget everything you know. About
Well,
the
I mean,
X-Men.
yeah, if you watch it just as a movie, just as a Wolverine movie, it's still a good time. It shows that conflict between Logan and his brother. And the fact that he had these powers as a kid and that he grew up in the different wars and was able to use his powers, to fight the wars and help whatever team he was on win. And then as he got older, his brother got more manipulative and kind of tried to get him to join him, but at the same time was like double crossing him, and it was this whole storyline. And we won't talk about Deadpool. But other than that, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a good movie. I mean, it's definitely better than some of the MCU crap that we've been getting recently. So I went for it. So I put it at number 9 on my list.
My number 9 was the original Spider-Man movie from 2002. You want to talk about like a classic and stuff. That one still is a classic to this day. I love going back and rewatching it every once in a while. Sometimes it's on TV or whatever. I think they did a really good job, like showing what it would be like if a real person, like all of a sudden came upon having superpowers and that sort of stuff, and like how they would deal with that. How he starts to learn what his powers are. How he has to balance his normal life with also this new secret identity that he has to have, and like the responsibility of being a hero and all that stuff. That's portrayed really well in this movie, and for it being around like in the early 2000s and stuff, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of CGI in that movie either. Like I feel like a lot of it was just set pieces and that sort of thing. And it probably was. I'm not too sure how they filmed it exactly. I know some stuff obviously was like CGI partially or whatever, like people weren't actually exploding and that sort of thing. But for its time, I mean that's compared to some of the other CGI battles and all that stuff that we've seen over the years with all these superhero movies and everything, I think it did really well showing all of that. It made it feel real too. Like you kind of feel like Spider-Man is actually swinging through New York City. You feel like the Green Goblin is gliding over that bridge and throwing those passengers off the bridge and all that stuff. And I also just think the acting, like they picked the perfect actors, I think, to play these characters too. Like Tobey Maguire just feels like that nerdy type person that would be like a Peter Parker. And Willem Dafoe is like brilliant casting for the Green Goblin. He does that laugh really well, that evil smirk when he like transforms into the Goblin and that kind of stuff. When he has that whole like alternate personality type of thing where he doesn't actually know he's doing these things, or at least he blocks out the fact that he's doing them. He showed that really well through his acting and everything. And just, the fight scenes and all that stuff as well. It's just some of the things, I mean, you can look back on this movie and think it's pretty much a perfect superhero movie. It's not just an origin story, but it's also like, it just gives you that feel of like what it means to be a superhero. And I kind of love that about it.
I'm surprised you had it this low on your list because mine is a lot higher. So I'll talk about why once we get there, but I'm surprised you put it at number 9.
I know. I just had a lot more like if we had done this like years ago, this one probably would have been higher. But since there's been a lot of really good Marvel movies that have come out lately, I feel like that's what made it this low, because there's just been some really high points in Marvel's movies recently. Going to number 8 now, I have X-Men Days of Future Past. And I think the reason I like this movie so much is because of the way that they incorporated the sort of like, I guess, time travel in a way that we've never really seen before. Like, because it was sort of like Wolverine, was teleported, I'll say teleported, I guess, or transported back in time to his younger self through his mind. But meanwhile, his actual present body is still in the present. Like he's still just laying there asleep basically, and he's dreaming these things, but he's actually back in time. Like his brain was somehow teleported through time, that sort of thing. We'd never seen that before, and it kind of actually made sense in a way, more so than like the way they explained it, like Avengers Endgame when they tried to do their time travel stuff.
Yeah.
Time travel's a complicated thing, but I think they did a really good job with it here. And I like the way that they managed to have the older actors and the younger actors in the same movie without them actually really interacting with each other than Hugh Jackman, interacting with the younger cast. It's a really interesting story, and they managed to keep it like sort of coherent. Like nothing's really confusing about it, even though it is a like time travel movie. And they showed really well how it like the things that happened in the past change the future and all that stuff, and that they have to change it a certain way in order for the things of the future to not take place. I don't want to spoil like too much of what happens in it, but it is a really good movie, and it was a nice culmination to the X-Men franchise, because after that point I think we got like Deadpool and stuff, and then you got like Logan and everything to really just cap it off, I guess. But those were solo films. This was like, I feel like the perfect send off to the actual X-Men movies, because then they had like X-Men Apocalypse after this and all that stuff, and that one wasn't really that good. And that one, had the younger cast and everything too. But this one was a nice, they should have just ended like the X-Men franchise with that almost, and just kind of like went off into the sunset with it, because I think it was a good ending to the actual X-Men movies.
Now my number 8 is the movie that kicked off the MCU, Iron Man. So when you have a movie so impactful for a franchise that it literally builds into 28 other movies in that franchise
and counting,
being made, plus 7 or 8 different Disney Plus shows, however many there are.
All that kind of stuff, right?
All of that based off of, because they made Iron Man as a movie, and they had a vision back then. I don't know if it was Stan Lee's vision, if it was Marvel's vision, or if it was somebody else's, but they kind of had, the timeline built out where they wanted it to lead to, what it comes to, and then everything after Endgame we don't talk about. But for it to be so impactful like that, and I think they definitely had the best person possible to play Tony Stark, because Robert Downey Jr. at that point just seemed like he would have been that kind of arrogance, type of actor. So that portrayal wasn't necessarily anything like too far of a stretch for him to cover. He was able to kind of hone into stuff that he's actually sort of been through, and use that in his performance. And then, just the whole movie, I think, when you're setting it up, it shows. I just love the part when he switches from creating weapons to trying to protect the people that his weapons were destroying. And it takes him being captured and, forced to build the Jericho missile in the cave, and the death of Yinsen, before he realizes that the money that he had was all because of the lives that his weapons were taking. The innocent lives that his weapons were taking. So he was able to use that and kind of flip it around. And then from there forward, we see improvement after improvement after improvement to protect other people. And of course, by the end of Endgame, his ultimate sacrifice to protect everybody. So it all started with Iron Man, where he's able to learn that you can make a difference for the better rather than for the worst. There are other movies on my list, movie-wise, that I like better, but for the plot and the storytelling of Iron Man, I would definitely take that as kind of a top tier movie, and for them to build off of that for the rest of the MCU
That's
just
true.
goes to show you something
Right.
about Iron Man. Now, speaking of first movies in franchises, my number 7 is X-Men, the first X-Men movie. Um, it's number 7 because I do like the characters. I don't know. It's just something about like mutants versus somebody like, say, Captain America, who's kind of built to be a superhero, whereas mutants are kind of not really seen as heroes because they have a defect in a way. But a lot of them are able to use that defect for the good. You know, you look at Xavier and all of his followers, and then there's some that use it for evil. But they were just cool because they had powers that like you didn't see a lot in other superhero kind of stuff.
Right.
You
That's
look
true.
at even stuff from DC, like you look at Batman and Superman, you know, the Justice League. You have certain powers, and Superman can pretty much do everything, so that don't count. But Batman is basically just a guy in a suit with technology. You know, Wonder Woman has her limits. Justice League, all of them have certain things that they can and can't do. Whereas like the X-Men, each person had their own thing, but when they were a group and they were together, you never knew what you were gonna get.
And they learned how to combine
Right.
them together. So yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really mention that, but yeah, the portrayal of their powers and everything, like each one, like you said, being unique and everything. And you're right, it is something we haven't seen. We haven't seen a lot of those superpowers. Like one guy's a toad, like he has toad powers,
Yep.
you know, or Storm, she has the powers of the storms, and that kind of, you know, it's like that's something different. And each hero, you know, or each mutant has their own unique thing about them. And I think the overall story of that is that we all have something different about us, like in real life and stuff. And
Yep.
what makes us unique doesn't mean we're different. It means we should use it to improve on the world or whatever. You know, so that's kind of like the lesson you can take from that movie. But for me, at number 7, I actually put the first Avengers movie. Like you talk about, you know, kicking off a franchise and everything. I feel like when you go and watch when you or if you're like a first time MCU watcher and you watch all those hero solo movies, you know, you got the first two Iron Man movies, the Incredible Hulk, Thor, and then Captain America: The First Avenger. To see all those actors, those big time actors at the time, even, or maybe they weren't as big time at the time. I'm not sure, but those actors from that movie, from all those different movies coming together for one big movie like that, where they're still playing those same roles, but they're combining them, you know, into one big team up movie. Like we'd never seen that before. Maybe in animation, you know, because I think at the time there was still like animated like X-Men movies or TV shows. There was still a Spider-Man TV show, and the Avengers even I think had a show at the time, a cartoon or something. But on the big screen with live action actors and everything, we'd never seen that before. And I think the first time that you really watch this movie, it just feels like a spectacle. It feels iconic because of that, because they brought these actors together, minus Edward Norton, but and replaced him with Mark Ruffalo. But still, you know, they brought all these actors together and all these heroes teaming up for the first time ever. And I like that you get to see the different I guess the ways that they sort of hate each other almost, or they're like mocking each other in a way, like what's so special about you and that kind of stuff. And you see them arguing a lot, proves that they're not really that great of a team. Like Hulk says in that movie, we're a time bomb, you know, we're a chemical mixture that makes chaos. And that's really what we see throughout the whole Avengers saga is that everything they do, they're really fighting with each other. Like one of them makes a decision and the others don't agree with it, and then they clash with each other. That's what leads to civil war and all that later on down the line in the MCU timeline. But you see all that in this one, basically, I think it's almost or it's 2 hours, maybe a little over 2 hour long movie, maybe even under 2 hours, I don't know. but you kind of get all that just from these first introductions with these characters interacting with each other and everything. I think it was all really well done and just felt like a big time blockbuster movie almost. Even though it kind of goes really quickly, like once the plot gets going, it's like over already. Like they build up to the fight with Loki and everything, and then it's just kind of over in a way. Like I feel like after they do the helicarrier stuff, they get to the final battle, and that like it's just really quick. The story and pacing is really quick, but it's still a good superhero movie, and it's really awesome to go back and rewatch. Like I've seen that one probably more than any other MCU movie because it's on TV all the time now, and just to see that they were able to pull that off at the time and then continue to build on that and bring the heroes back together again for the next Avengers movie and the next one after that, and they're still doing it now and everything. I think that all worked out really well for their franchise, and it all kind of started here. And you can even you can watch the Avengers without seeing the other individual movies, I think, and it still works out. You still feel like it's a big time thing because they're fighting this big time world-ending threat kind of thing. And just hearing about that there were these individual heroes being brought together like that, I think gives it that same kind of feel where it feels big time and you feel like you're watching something important, even if you haven't seen any of the other stuff and you don't have all the context of who the characters are. They did a good job of reintroducing the characters in a way to people who may not have seen the other movies, so that when you go into this watching it, you still kind of get a feel for who they are. At number 6 for me, then, is also kind of on the same level of the Avengers. I have Captain America Civil War. I like this one for similar reasons to the first Avengers movie, because I like that this one sort of pits the Avengers against each other. Like, this is really the first time we're actually seeing these heroes fighting each other. The first time we're seeing Iron Man go up against Captain America, other than they have that little fight like him, Thor, and Captain America in the first Avengers movie, but it wasn't anything really special. Like, not too much happened. They knocked each other around a bit, then they kind of called it a truce and just took off and went and got Loki again. But this one, like, you feel that tension because Tony really does hate. Like, he doesn't hate Steve necessarily, but he hates that Steve is defending Bucky after we find out what happened. That Bucky killed Tony's parents and all that stuff. You get all of that really deep, traumatic emotions and everything from these characters that it really does just tear them apart. And that's why they're not together fully, and when Thanos comes around in Infinity War, it's because of this movie, because of the things that happen in this movie. And it really is a turning point for the Avengers as characters and as heroes. And it kind of leaves you devastated almost in the same way that like Infinity War did. When everyone's you're like shocked at the end of it. Like, how are they going to come back from this? And for this to pretty much directly go into, well, I think it went into Spider-Man Homecoming, but like this movie, for the Avengers at least, the next thing we see the Avengers together as a group in is Infinity War. So to see them come from that into Infinity War where they are broken up and everything. It all started in this movie, and it was just a really good story and everything. I think they kind of convoluted it a little bit, like having Zemo trying to break them up, but also had the Sokovia Accords breaking them up. Like, they should have just done away with the Sokovia stuff and just focused on Zemo having this grand plan to get the Avengers to face each other and everything. That would have made him seem more threatening of a villain.
And see, that's the reason that I didn't put it on this list. I love the first 3 Captain America movies. They're 3 of my favorite MCU movies. But looking back on it and coming up with the things for this list, the stuff with Zemo in Civil War, for me, didn't need to happen. It is a good movie. I love the battle scene. I love the conflict between Tony and Steve, and Tony and himself, basically, because he doesn't want to hate Steve, but he also kind of has to because Steve's friend killed his parents. So it was that inner conflict and outer conflict all coming together. The Sokovia Accord stuff was stupid. They shouldn't even worried about that.
Especially since it was like repealed,
Yeah,
like in later
they
things.
just went over it
kinda,
now.
like,
They just got rid of it. I mean, I get it kind of set up for Infinity War and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was just the whole Zemo stuff for me, I think, is why it's not on this list. Now, my number 6 is this guy right here. Venom. The first Venom. Not the other two garbage ones after that. Let There Be Garbage and whatever the new one's called.
Let There Be Garbage. That's a good one.
The first Venom movie, I love the villain. Like, I love the whole conflict between Eddie and Venom, where they need each other, but at the same time they both want to do their own thing. So then Eddie has to teach Venom how to not eat people, and Venom has to teach Eddie how to fight and how to survive, in a world of people and things that are stronger and bigger than you are, and yet if you have the right people on your side, that you can win. It was just a fun movie overall, and Tom Hardy's portrayal was fantastic as Venom, playing both parts, Venom and Eddie Brock, and just to see that conflict of him basically with himself. But when Venom tries to take over the body, and then Eddie's fighting back, and especially the apartment scene where they just destroy the apartment, because Venom's hungry, and then Eddie's like, you can't eat again, and then they start like, and it's just this whole thing. It's just a fun movie. It's fun to watch that conflict, but then it's also serious when it needs to be, and they come together in the end to defeat their enemy. So I think for me that's why Venom is here, just because it is one of those things, and I wish the other two would have carried on the same way. Unfortunately they didn't. I will say Let There Be Carnage wasn't completely garbage, but for the most part of it, it was garbage.
I think I didn't have Venom on this list just because, it is like a fun movie. In the same way that, Deadpool is a fun movie and stuff. It's not necessarily the greatest superhero spectacle of all time. I don't have any of the Deadpool movies on here either, spoiler alert, but because those are just fun movies to watch because they're so ridiculous and funny, and they almost feel like they're basically comedy movies, but they're also superhero movies, so it's that doesn't really necessarily work. It's just funny, so that's why it's entertaining, that's why we enjoy them.
But that's what Venom did well.
Yeah.
They combined the comedy, they knew when to be serious. Unlike Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder,
where the whole thing
was like a comedy movie, and then even in the serious parts they're cracking jokes. Venom was able to do that, so they made it funny. They had that conflict, but then they were like, oh well, we got to team up, and then it was serious, until it was over, then back to the comedy. So they did that well, and that's why I put it on my list.
And number 5 for me, I have Spider-Man 2. Now, when you look, like I mentioned earlier, all that good stuff about the original Spider-Man movie and everything, this one took all that and really improved on it. It continues the story of Peter Parker and trying to live his life, but also trying to be Spider-Man. These movies, at least the first two anyway, even the third one, I guess, technically, the story of Peter Parker and his relationship with Mary Jane and him just trying to live his life feels like you're watching a drama rather than a superhero movie, which is what I kind of enjoyed about it the most. It makes it feel more realistic, and it makes it feel like we would be in this same situation if we had suddenly came across having superpowers and all that kind of stuff, or we suddenly had to become a superhero. We would be struggling with, how do I live a normal life while also fighting crime and trying to hide my identity, trying to hide the fact that I am this hero, and he really struggles with that. You can see that, especially in the second movie, because we don't really know how or why he loses his powers in this movie for a good portion of the movie.
That is true.
But I've heard rumors or theories or whatever that it was like stress related, because like your brain programs your body to remove something that's stressful to you or whatever, or to like push that away, kind of. Your body is programmed to do that. So if you look at it like that, like he's stressed out about being Spider-Man, he wants to focus on living his normal life, so his mind and his body kind of get rid of the superhero part of himself, or suppress it. At least his brain suppresses it so that he can focus on that stuff, and that's why he loses the powers and he gets his vision, or his he has to wear his glasses again and all that kind of stuff. They don't really explain why he loses his powers, but I like to think of it like that, and that makes it even better, like that makes it feel more real, and that's kind of what you want in a superhero movie. I know it's supposed to be this like big, grand battle and all that kind of stuff, and the heroes fighting villains and all that type of stuff, and a lot of battles and everything and action. But when you get down to the story aspect of it, that's what you're supposed to have, this kind of emotion, this trauma that this hero is going through, and the internal conflict and struggles that they're dealing with. It makes it more relatable to us, and I think that was really shown well in this second Spider-Man movie. And the fact that he also like then gets his powers back, because he starts to realize that the city needs him. These people need him. He starts to see crime happening and he can't do anything about it, and that kind of stuff. And when it finally hits home on him, when like MJ is in danger, he jumps back into action.
I mean, she's always in danger.
And he gets his powers back and everything. It's that transition back into it. He gets his spidey senses back and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was all really cool, because not only are we seeing a superhero film, but we're seeing a sort of realistic superhero film with like a person just trying to be a person and a superhero at the same time. I feel like they meshed that really well and put it into the plot really well as well. All of that is, really grounded and down to earth and everything, and we as the audience can really grasp onto that more than just a CGI battle in the sky between a hero and villain and all that.
For me, the best Spider-Man is always going to be the original Spider-Man. Just something about Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, J.K. Simmons pulling off J. Jonah Jameson for the comedy relief.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in every movie, every Spider-Man movie. But just something about, and I think Spider-Man was the first superhero movie that I actually watched. I don't think I watched any of the Batmans and the rest of the Marvel stuff. Spider-Man was like the first thing that I remember watching, at least, superhero-wise. And I always, for some reason, like the villains of movies. I think they're just well written and cool. I mean, if they do it the right way. And Green Goblin was, I mean, the outfit's kind of cool, first of all. But that conflict of it, for how he got to where he was at and why, being kicked out of his own company, then trying to make himself better, but by doing so makes himself worse by taking the gas, whatever you call it, to make himself into the Green Goblin, and then comes to get the revenge. And the Uncle Ben stuff, the conflict of Peter not wanting to listen to his parental figure in this. I mean, it's pretty much every kid. But then you see where Peter is like fed up with Uncle Ben to the point where he's like, just drop me off and leave me alone. He goes and does the wrestling thing with Macho Man. Oh yeah. And then finds out that Uncle Ben was shot. And it kind of changes his perspective, and you just see that, you feel the emotion, for them to be able to portray that emotion and show that for these characters in a superhero movie is why I think it's so high on my list and why it is one of my favorite superhero movies in general. I have for number 4 the second to last or second to best Avengers movie, in my opinion, Avengers Endgame.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Wow.
And I'll explain why.
Wow.
Endgame for me, the thing that got it to number 4 and not like number 1 or 2 was the time travel stuff.
That's true. Yeah, it can't. It
For
does
me,
bog it down.
It was too convoluted for time travel. I get that they tried to retcon all other versions of time travel that we knew of from movies. It just, they had to make it fit the plot. It doesn't make sense. Other than that, good movie. I love the plot of it. Obviously, Tony's sacrifice. Great storytelling. The time travel, just for me, that's why it's at number 4.
That's a good point. It does bog it down, but I'll talk about that more because it is on my list. When I get to it, I'll talk more about my thoughts on it. But for me, at number 4 is Logan. I think the way that they made this movie and everything, it felt like one of those old like Western kind of movies where like the character of Logan and Wolverine is older. Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier is a lot older in this movie and everything, and they just survived beyond all the other mutants, I guess, because Xavier inadvertently, through having seizures and stuff, I guess, killed off a lot of other mutants or all the other mutants or whatever, or at least killed the X-Men mutants that are associated with them or that go to his school and that type of thing. So you have that kind of emotional toll there where like Xavier didn't mean to do this. He's just aging, and you get a look at what an aging man with telepathy, like how that would impact, or what he would do, like what his body would do in that scenario. We see that he like causes destruction and all that kind of stuff. And then of course Wolverine is sort of, because he's aging too, so he's losing the ability almost to regenerate and heal himself and everything else, and that's why he's able to die by the end of the movie. I think it was a nice send off to Wolverine as a character and to Charles Xavier really too, and a nice way to sort of end the X-Men franchise. But of course they didn't after that, but still. It's not meant to be an X-Men movie anyways because it is about Logan. But I definitely think it's the best of like the Wolverine trilogy, I guess, in a way, because you had X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Wolverine, and then this one. But this would have been a nice send-off to the X-Men franchise if they had just ended it here. It is a fun movie, and the story and everything is really good too. And it is kind of emotional, like finally seeing Wolverine like learning what death feels like. Like he finally gets that perfect death that he's always really wanted because he's lived so long because of his abilities and everything. So you get that emotion at the end of it as well, and I think that worked out really well.
I actually had it at number 3, Logan.
Okay, transition.
So we'll just transition into my number 3.
Number 3.
For me, that is the definition of a near perfect movie. It's just something about it. I don't know if it's the emotion behind it or the fact that it was technically the end of the X-Men movies.
Or at least like the original.
Yeah. Hugh Jackman's performance as Logan in this movie, where he has to comprehend, like you said, death, because that's a feeling that Logan never really had before, because he could just regenerate and move on. I mean, you look at how many times he pretty much died in everything else he was in. and still survived. He never really had that feel of it, but now that everybody else is gone, you see that kind of emotion driven performance from Hugh Jackman to where he has to be a saddened, character while he also still has to be caring towards Xavier, who was a mentor to him, who took him in when nobody else would. He knows that he could just let Xavier be on his own and do his own thing and make things worse, or he could stay and take care of him. So he has to balance both of those, losing everybody, plus it being because of Xavier that he lost everybody, but him not being able to hate Xavier because he cares about him so much. And then we get X-23, his daughter, and the whole thing for me, even the performance from Patrick Stewart as that kind of aged Xavier, where he's responsible for the death of so many other mutants, but whether or not he fully comprehends that he's responsible for it is what leads to that type of performance. And it was just an overall fantastic movie, in my opinion. I love Logan.
And you said about near perfect movies and stuff. Well, my number 3 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This to me is the most realistic superhero movie I've ever seen. It doesn't feel like a superhero movie. It feels like almost like a war movie, or like just an action movie akin to like Mission Impossible or one of those kind of things. And you get the drama of, the villain of the movie being Steve's best friend, who he thought was dead all these years. But here he survived the same kind of way that Steve did. He was kind of frozen, taken in by Hydra instead of S.H.I.E.L.D. He didn't fall asleep and wake up. He's been out there killing people because Hydra brainwashed him and everything. You get that emotion and that struggle from Steve Rogers in this movie that he doesn't want to fight him, he doesn't want to kill him because he's his best friend. He still sees his best friend in the Winter Soldier, and you see that especially when they're fighting on the helicarrier. He's letting Bucky basically almost kill him, beating him to death because he won't defend himself. He doesn't want to fight back against Bucky, and you see that throughout the whole movie. And that's even his motivations for in Civil War and stuff too. When Bucky is being framed for the murder of T'Chaka, and all the explosions and all that Zemo caused. Steve is still there to defend him because he knows his friend is still in there, and he knows he's not trying to do these things, but he's still been brainwashed. But that all starts here in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And I think it breaks tradition of what a superhero movie is meant to be, because this one just feels like I said, just like a normal action movie that you could watch and not think you're watching a superhero film. You're just watching it for that story of these two best friends forced to fight each other because one is doing villainous things that he's not trying to, and the other is the good guy hero trying to defend everybody from those actions. And it's just so good of a movie. I think the story just works really well within, the Marvel universe and everything. They didn't really have to, they didn't necessarily, it doesn't have the other Avengers in it, so it's not like you had to reference any of that kind of stuff. It works as a standalone movie almost, which I think is why it's so perfect. It's definitely the best of the 4 Captain America movies, in my opinion, now that the Brave New World is out and everything. But I still say this one is the best solo MCU movie, and I don't think they've made a better one yet. I don't think they ever will, probably. I think they really nailed it with this movie. So that's why it's number 3 on my list, because I just think it's the best. They did really well with the story and the action and mixing it all, and took away the elements of it being a superhero film because it's two heroes, or a hero and a villain that are more just people with the skills of fighting rather than having like, oh, I have lasers or I have lightning and that kind of stuff. It's just they're two soldiers trained to fight, and we see them fighting each other even though they don't both want to really. That whole story for that movie was really well done.
Um, all of that you just said is literally why this is my number two. Winter Soldier. If you watch anything in the MCU, watch Captain America: The Winter Soldier. You don't need the context of what happened in the first one because they go into enough detail. You don't need anything that happens after that. Just let it end the way it ends, and you'll be fine if that's all you watch in the MCU. It shows, like you said, about that conflict of Steve Rogers not wanting to hurt his friend. And this really starts to build on who Captain America really is. We saw it in the first one where he was willing to make the sacrifice, of crashing the plane into the ice and not being able to be with Peggy and all that kind of stuff. But now in this one, it's a different threat. It's one thing when you're facing Red Skull, who's just the enemy of everybody. It's another thing when you're fighting your own friend. And he takes what he does here and does it every single time from then on. If there's a conflict with a friend, he tries to let the friend work it out in their way. He does it with Tony in Civil War. He knows that Tony is upset with him and he hates Bucky because of what he did. But Captain America very easily, well, not easily necessarily, but very well could have defeated Tony, and he didn't. He very easily could have lifted Thor's hammer in Avengers Age of Ultron, and he didn't. And the reason he doesn't do these things is because that's not who Captain America is. He doesn't need to be the show-off. He doesn't need to be the guy that always wins. He needs to be the guy that keeps everybody else motivated and wanting to keep going. And if it means losing a battle or losing a friend, he would rather lose the battle than lose the friend. And that all starts with the Winter Soldier. And you learn it from different perspectives because it's the same with him and Natasha. They grow closer. And then it also shows that Bucky still knows who Steve is, even though he's being manipulated by Zemo. And that's why Bucky ends up where he's at now, because he's able to take that and he works from it, from being the Winter Soldier to being Bucky Barnes. So it's really a build for both of these characters. And the way they did it, I'm just glad that the air conditioning was fully operational. That's all I can say. A great movie.
For Nick Fury in this.
Number two.
I also like, and it is kind of a sort of espionage movie as well because of the whole Hydra taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. type thing, and you get like it's like a spy thriller and an action movie more than a superhero movie set in a superhero universe. And that it is a perfect movie, but it's not number one for me or number two, just because there are two that are better. I think that is definitely the best solo movie, like I said, for Marvel in general, for superhero movies in general. I think that's the perfect blueprint you should focus on for these superhero movies. But for me, number two is Avengers Endgame. I just think just the nostalgia and the callbacks to everything. Like you said, the portal scene at the end, even
that is the best part of the movie.
I know, and even Captain America lifting Mjolnir and everything. I don't think I've ever heard people cheer in a theater more than they have from this whole movie.
That is true.
All those, just the end battle alone, I think is worth the watch. I know, like you said, the time travel stuff kind of takes it away from being number one for me too. But I didn't think it deserved to be like number four, but it's still a really good movie though because we're seeing the climax to everything we've seen already. Because Marvel did such a good job of building to everything, building up to Infinity War, building up to Endgame, building up to the battles with Thanos and all that stuff. They did a great job, even where there were some duds of a movie and that kind of stuff throughout that whole saga. They still did a good job of building the characters up to these moments so that we get these emotional payoffs in this movie.
Yeah.
You get Tony Stark making a sacrifice that he would have never made probably in the early days, like back at the beginning. Yeah. He wouldn't have sacrificed himself. Although he kind of did, though. In the first Avengers movie, he takes the missile up there and shoots it off into space, knowing that he could have died if he didn't make it back through the portal in time, So he kind of did that in a way, but to make this kind of sacrifice, I don't think he would have even thought that.
He had a lot more to lose in Endgame
than he did, and that's just because of the character journey that he's been on. You see Steve Rogers' character journey and stuff. He still stands up to fight Thanos even though he's on his own. All the other heroes were knocked out. This was before the portal scene. He's got half a shield left, a broken arm, whatever, and he stands back up in the face of Thanos. Like all of that, those scenes alone and everything make this like the perfect ending to any saga you'll ever see, I think. If you ignore the time travel stuff and the logic that they used surrounding it in order for them to bring the other heroes back, and you just enjoy the movie for the nostalgia trip that it is, for the climactic ending to the saga that it is a perfect movie. And, like I said, I've never seen an audience react to a movie in theaters until I watched this movie. Like people cheering as if they were at a sporting event.
Yep.
And even myself cheering. I was shocked seeing Mjolnir fly into Captain America's hands. I think I let out a little scream or something too. It was just like that iconic because, that moment alone, like they, showed throughout the MCU that nobody can lift Thor's hammer. Like that's something unique to Thor, that he's worthy of wielding that. So to see that pay off where like someone else is worthy, and it's Steve Rogers of all people, because of course it is. Because like you said, that's the kind of person that he is.
Right.
All of those moments really work and make that movie the best thing that Marvel put together, in my opinion. Although there's one thing that keeps it down for me at number 2 instead of number 1, and it is that time travel stuff. But everything else in that movie is really, really good. And I enjoy going back and watching it again. You get all the iconic lines from that movie that people enjoy. The Avengers Assemble, bringing all of the characters together for this huge battle. Just seeing all those heroes on the screen at the same time, even though the actors probably weren't even in the same room when they filmed this scene.
Yeah.
Like they just CGI'd them all in. But on a scale like that, you've never seen something quite like that before. And I don't think, even with Doomsday and Secret Wars and all that coming up, I don't think they can top what they did with Endgame, because now everything just feels like they're throwing stuff at the wall, and they just want to get to Doomsday and get it over with and get Secret Wars over with so they can move on to what they have planned next or something. Yeah. But I don't think they'll ever really top what they did with Avengers Endgame. And then, of course, I'll just go into number 1 then.
I think we both can.
My number 1 is Avengers Infinity War. The thing that makes this one better than Avengers Endgame, I think, is just the emotional stakes that you feel throughout this. The movie, there's barely any, uppity sort of music in this movie either. Like, a lot of the films, have that kind of fun and, sort of funky music or whatever, just to, upbeat and that kind of stuff, or just to be funny, and it has those comic moments, which this does have in it. It has some comedy moments, but there's just the way they did the music and the score and everything, it just makes it feel so tense. Like you don't feel like you feel the danger that Thanos brings to this universe. You feel like it's similar to, I compare it to The Walking Dead. When Negan is first introduced, in The Walking Dead, you feel this tension, you feel this threat. Like all of a sudden, everything's about to change for these heroes. And that's what you get in Avengers Infinity War as well.
Yeah.
From the first time we see Thanos on screen, when he, like, the very first scene is him, like, attacking Thor's ship and killing pretty much all the Asgardians, killing Loki in front of Thor and taking the Tesseract to start his quest for all the other Infinity Stones. You know, right from the get-go, you know this is going to be a different movie. People are going to die. Yep. Something is going to happen in this. And if you didn't know, like if you've never read the comics or whatever or heard anything about it, you know that if you have, you know that in the comics Thanos does succeed. He snaps his fingers and wipes out half of all life in the universe with the Infinity Stones. But if you'd never heard of that before, you didn't know who Thanos was and that kind of thing, like I've never read the comics. I kind of knew what was coming and was expecting it, but I also didn't expect them to actually do it.
Yeah, the thing for me that puts it at number one is that emotion. When Thor throws Stormbreaker at Thanos, it lands in his chest, and Thor, being the cocky Thor that he always was, thought that he had won. Thanos, you should have gone for the head, and snaps his fingers. I remember being in the theaters with the same reaction that all of the surviving Avengers had, and that was what just happened.
Right.
Because everything we knew leading up to this, all the Thor movies, all the Iron Mans, all the Captain Americas, the Incredible Hulk movie, Ant-Man, Spider-Man, all of that stuff leading up to this, the hero won. All of it. Doctor Strange, all of it.
That's true.
The hero won.
First one.
You watch Infinity War, and you're like, wait a second.
Someone just won this.
Thanos just won. Thanos destroyed half of all living things on Earth. Well, in the universe.
Right.
It gave you that emotion of where are they going from here?
Right, yeah. I mean, I remember thinking that too. I'm like, how are they going to... Because obviously, like, you can probably guess they are going to get back the other heroes.
Right.
Because, like, if they just left them, like, oh, they're dead now. Like, we introduced them, but they're dead now. Like, forever or whatever. Like, right. I think people would hate that. So, like, they had to come up with a way to bring them back for Avengers Endgame. And I think just between Infinity War and Endgame, when you're kind of wondering how is this going to work, how are these heroes going to come back from this, you know, that's the perfect way to do a cliffhanger. Because like you said, you know, the heroes are in this state of like shock almost, like, well, we just lost this battle and like what are we going to do now? And even like at the beginning of Endgame when we see how the heroes, you know, they're grieving and everything, and then they find a chance to go confront Thanos.
Just to realize it's a dead end.
And to find out that he destroyed the stones, it's like, and then they have to skip ahead to 5 years and everything.
The emotion behind it, as well as what it leads to in future projects, with the blip happening and people leaving for 5 years, then coming back, and the world is now changed. You know, people have moved on, they lost their homes or whatever because they were gone, so now somebody else is living in their home. Just the overall impact of this one scene at the end of Infinity War, everything that led up to it led to Thanos snapping his fingers and pretty much changed the trajectory of everything that happened after that. And whether it was for the heroes or for just the normal people in that universe, it had that impact, and it had that impact on us watching it. And that's how you know it was a good movie, because the whole time you were on the edge of your seat. You know, he kills Loki at the beginning, takes the Tesseract. All right, where's he going next?
And I don't think I've ever seen a movie talked about for like an entire year leading into the Avengers
next
Endgame
one.
because that one was a year later. Or whatever.
Everybody wanted to know what was going to happen.
But there was all kinds of theory videos about what's going to happen, how things are going to happen, whatever. People were just talking about it for that whole year leading into, I guess, Captain Marvel first, and then Avengers Endgame. But just like you said, it's the emotion and everything that we felt as an audience, seeing our favorite characters losing this type of battle, like losing to this very serious threat, and seeing half of our favorite characters just like all of a sudden disappearing because of the villain. I think it really hits you, and it's like that's how you do a perfect cliffhanger. And I think just to sum it up to the end of this movie where it's just complete silence as everyone's like decimating, all you hear is the voices, like the characters saying things like whatever, but there's no music in the background. And I think that was like perfect because that's how the universe feels right now. It's like all of a sudden there's just silence, like no one knows what to say because you're just in shock, and it conveyed that emotion to us watching it as well. And that's how you know it's the perfect story. Infinity War could have just been like if they had just literally ended with Infinity War and like never brought the other characters back or something.
Like that's the end of the MCU
there
is Infinity War.
That's it's like what a way to go out, And I also like the theory someone said one time or whatever that this was Thanos' story. Like Thanos is the protagonist of this story, and the Avengers and the other characters are the antagonists trying to stop him from achieving his goal, because he's the first one we see on screen, really. Thanos is the one going on the grand adventure to collect the things he needs to collect, like Harry Potter was going on the adventure to stop or to take out all the Horcruxes, or the adventure that Frodo goes on in Lord of the Rings to get the ring to Mount Doom. Thanos is Frodo getting the ring to Mount Doom. In this case, the ring is the 6 Infinity Stones, and his Mount Doom, instead of destroying, his Mount Doom is snapping his fingers and destroying half the universe. So it is that Thanos is the main character. I like that they kind of did that and sort of flipped the script on it. And that's why Infinity War deserves to be the best Marvel movie that they've ever made, and I don't think they will top it.
They will not top it. I don't care what they do in Doomsday. It will be forced. It'll just be like, we have to bring these people in because we opened the multiverse, and now we can just, whoever can show up. Heck, I could be in Doomsday. You don't know.
You are.
But, yeah, nothing will ever... I mean, you have to build to something like this. And there wasn't enough build between Endgame and Doomsday to have the emotion be there when Doctor Doom inevitably destroys maybe everybody that we know, maybe some people that we know, maybe destroys the whole MCU and they start over. Doom is going to win in some capacity in this movie, I feel. But it's not going to be as serious for us emotionally as it was when Thanos snapped his fingers. Because we had, 23 movies, I think, before Infinity War, or 20-something before Infinity War, to really connect with these characters and learn the emotion behind why they're fighting the fight that they're fighting. And for all of that to just end in 1 second by literally the snap of a finger. Was just... I remember being in the theaters and I had that oh crap look. Like
I can't believe they just did this.
Something just happened and it's going to change not only in the movies for the people in that world, in the movie, but it changed for us because now we had, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And Endgame was a good end to that. And in my personal opinion, the MCU should have ended with Endgame and just been done. But Infinity War led to that, and Infinity War is the best of the best when it comes to Marvel movies.
But let us know what you guys think down in the comment section. What would your top 10 Marvel movies of all time be? What did you think of our lists? Was there anything you would have included or wouldn't have included? Let us know all that down in the comment section. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. And check out, if you're a Marvel fan, check out all the other Marvel content we've uploaded on this channel as well. We do enjoy talking about Marvel a lot, so there's a lot of videos to look for as well. So keep an eye out for anything else we do as well for Marvel in the future. Obviously, we'll be talking about the upcoming Avengers movies and all that as they come out. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you for watching the video, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.